Blessings to the spirits of this place, the land, the water, the plants, and the animals. Thank you for your hospitality and holding us as we walk through our days. Blessings to the original inhabitants of these places, where I am and where you are. For us, it's the Ohlone, the Yelamu, the Lamai-Tush. May your descendants know joy, justice, sovereignty in their land back in this lifetime and all future lifetimes. Blessings to our ancestors, guides, guardians, and divine forces. Thank you for walking with us. Blessings to the one consciousness, the spiders, the mycelium, the webs that tie us all together. Blessings to the black flame, spirits of anarchy, revolution, and change. Blessings to the mothers, the moon, and the earth. Thank you for your abundance, wealth, rebirth that you give us. Blessings to all who turn their attention this way. May the container be held while we do this work, sharing this information. May there be no distractions or disruptions. And thank you all for joining me today. Blessings, Ashe, Aho, welcome. Okay, so today I would like to start with a story and something that's been coming up for me a lot all my life, even since I was a little kid, was death. The idea of death, feelings of having died before, and I used to have these reoccurring dreams. There were about 3 reoccurring dreams, all where I would die, and then I would wake up and just be a kid or a teenager or an adult, because I've had these reoccurring dreams so often. But the one dream that I want to talk about today first is a dream where I was in the driver's seat of a car. I'm driving, and to me, I can identify this area as maybe coastal California, Big Sur looking area. Very much forest on the left side of me, like forest, hills, cliffs maybe, and then cliffs down to the ocean on the right side of me, and a very narrow, windy road that I'm maneuvering on. And I remember being in a car, like an older car. I want to say like a 60s, 50s kind of car, driving and thinking to myself just how tired I am of living, of being a human, just exhausted. I don't remember what was going on in my life. I just remember the feeling of complete despondency and sadness. And I was ready, just ready for it to all be over. And I remember there being somebody in the passenger seat, but I was so clouded with my own depression maybe, or just hopelessness for living, and I couldn't take it anymore. I just couldn't take it anymore. I was over it, and we were coming up around a left turn, and this is the part that is just like really burned into my memory and would be the moment when I would wake up out of the dream. We're coming left around a turn, and I'm turning left, and then without thinking, just a knee-jerk reaction, just ready for it all to be over, I crank the wheel right, and we go flying off of a cliff, and then I wake up. And I had that dream so many times, as well as other dreams. A lot of times it was going over some cliff. I would often like sit at high points and just look down and imagine myself jumping off of the cliff. And this was since I was a little kid. And I know it seems really morose, but it was just what I would do. I would just imagine that all the time. And many, many years, go by. I'm almost 35 now. And I have been with my partner on and off for the better part of 7 years. And one day, he wakes up from a dream And he says he's sweating and he's freaked out a little bit. And I'm like, what happened? And he says, I have this reoccurring dream that I've had since I was young, where I am the passenger seat in a car and I love this person that I'm in the car with who's driving, and something happens, an accident happens, and I perceived it as an accident. He perceived it as an accident, and we fly off the cliff and we both die. And so this is, I had always thought that this dream that I had, or this idea that always was popping in my head even since I was young, was a past life. But that moment right there really solidified a lot of things for me. It solidified that my past lives could very well be something that I actually experienced, or experienced at some point in the multi-dimensional realm, this life where I killed myself in this particular way, killed myself and killed him. And also that even more connection, because I've had lots of connections in my life where I feel like I've spanned lifetimes with people. I've spanned lifetimes with these connections and these lessons that we're meant to teach each other or learn from each other in this lifetime. And I realized, wow, we were brought back together in this very interesting dynamic. And in this life, my guides, even before I called them guides, I knew them to be guides, were talking to me, were telling me things, were giving me knowledge and downloads. And they always told me, you don't get to die this time. I mean, you can die, but if you die, you're going to have to start all over again. And I just knew that to be true. I knew it in my bones because I have always had some of a death wish. I don't put myself in situations that are going to like physically harm myself usually, but I've never been afraid of death. When death happened around me, it never really freaked me out. I've always been really, really comfortable with death. And I felt that that comfort came because I had experienced it before. I felt like I knew that I had experienced death, we'd gone through it, and I ended up in another human body, or I ended up in another human body. And there was so much that I wanted to hold on to, but I didn't hold on to because I didn't see the lives through in the way that I was supposed to. And this is how I have come to view death. And I know everybody has their own beliefs, and I'm not trying to win you over to my side or anything. I'm just telling you, these are the things that I know to be true about myself. And whether anybody believes it or not doesn't really matter. It just colors the way that I perceive the world and the choices that I make. Because I don't view death as something to be afraid of. I don't feel tied to my ego or my personality. I never have. I've never cared if I'm remembered after I die. I don't care about things like legacy. And part of that comes from the fact that my people were not allowed a legacy in a lot of ways. Like my family, I don't know much about my family. A lot of my family have had Alzheimer's in like the most recent generations that I know. And colonization hit us really, really hard. So I never looked at my life in terms of legacy, which I think also in a lot of ways is a white supremacist construct. And it goes hand in hand with this colonizing and this passing down of wealth and privilege over generation and generation and generation that is not afforded to everybody in this world. And I'm not saying no melanated peoples have legacy, and I'm not saying that all white people are a part of that. I'm just saying in my reflection of the world, in the way that I've lived in this particular body, that has been the truth. And so, death, I've struggled with because ever since I was a kid, not being afraid of it, wanting to talk about it, wanting to feel closer to the other realms, like multidimensionality, and struggling with that because when I was younger, my grandmother was sick with Alzheimer's, and then my mom had mental health issues, diagnosed schizophrenia, and now has Alzheimer's herself. And the way that mental health is so pathologized, particularly for these most recent generations before us. Another thing that my spirits told me was, we're going to put a bubble around you and we're going to protect you from seeing too much or being too multidimensional, which could potentially lead to you being pathologized. And so I've had to really constantly reorient myself back to myself. And I constantly run up against the feeling of hopelessness, suicidal ideation, but not really because, like I said, I never really want to kill myself. I never want to actually harm myself, primarily because I know that I'll just have to start over again, most likely. And so, but I still carry this deep hopelessness, or at least I have more in my past. I feel that I've been able to turn things around by getting a little bit more joyous and embodied and understanding how to heal myself. And I think that that's why I want to talk about this right now and why I feel that this is so important, particularly because this last week has been really hard for me. And I think that with the way that the world is going right now and with everything that's going on around the world right now, there's a lot of waves that we're catching. And I think that for a lot of us, the highs don't equal the lows. There's way more lows than there are highs. And for the people who don't feel that way, God bless you. Must be nice. Must be a beautiful thing, because I cannot necessarily relate. And I have plenty of things to be grateful for, and I do remind myself every single day to focus on what I have to be grateful for. But I'm not in this all love and light camp that doesn't want to talk about shadow work, because we won't get anywhere without the combination of the shadow and the light. And so it can't all just be positivity. We have to be able to acknowledge that we are in late stage capitalism. Things are crumbling around us in a lot of ways. And physically, like literally, places are going up in flames. It's been so hot here. I already know we're running up on our fire season again. There's been intense fires for the past few years, so I don't see why it would stop anytime soon. And then places like Beirut, they're blowing up, and people are dying all over the world from any number of economic disasters, physical, natural disasters, police murdering constantly. There's plenty to be hopeless about. There's plenty to be saddened about, or to feel that maybe it could never get any better. And then there's also the flip side of that coin. And there has to be that flip side of the coin. Otherwise, what's the point? What's the point of doing anything? What's the point of caring about your body, caring about the ecosystem around you, caring about your community, We have to find reasons to care about that. And I think that this combination of a fear of death and also vibrating like you know it's coming at any given time, like we're constantly talking about here in California, earthquakes and fires. In other places, it's floods and tornadoes and hurricanes and more fires. There's all kinds of disasters and possibilities for disasters. And it can be extremely overwhelming. And why is it overwhelming? Because what can happen in disasters? Death. And I really, really want us to think about death in a different way. I heard a beautiful thing by an Egyptian elder speaking of in ancient Egypt, they didn't have a word for death. They called it westing. And westing being like the setting of the sun, you know, the sun sets, but it also rises again. And in their own way, they believed that death was not the end. And I think that death is only considered the end to us because we are so conditioned to believe that this ego, this personality is the top importance. This is what we need to save and store in our AI so that we can have our consciousness live on forever, when our consciousness does live on forever, and we can even tap into that consciousness and follow it forever if we could be more grounded in our physicality and our spirituality. But we're not people aren't talking about that. People are just talking about storing consciousness as if we were reducible to a little computer chip, or we could, like Futurama, cut off the heads and save the consciousness in the heads. I don't know. Is that do people know about Futurama? I don't know. Anywho, death is this thing that seems to be really scary for a lot of people, and I would just like us to try and reimagine a different way to perceive death, because you know deaths happen all the time. Obviously, like physical deaths, people die around us all the time, and the numbers have been climbing thanks to pandemics and all of the other diseases that are brought about by our way of living that doesn't actually serve anybody or anything, the way that we are in competition and instead of a symbiotic relationship where we all contribute what we have to contribute, and we allow and we receive and we're aware. We're not focused on that. And if we're not focused on that, then of course death is scary, because the death means the end to our perceived control over our situation, our current situation. And I know it's going to be a lot for people, at least some people, maybe some people who are watching this are on this tip with me, who are like, you know what, if we die, we die. And that might be a Pluto Scorpio generation, which is the people in my age bracket. And that's a beautiful thing, honestly, because if we are not afraid of dying, then nobody can have any control over us. All of the perceived control that anybody in power has is because we are afraid of death. If we are not afraid of death, then we can handle ourselves and our physical reality so much more differently. And death is a really intense thing. And I want people to I wonder how many people have had near-death experiences who are watching this. If anybody's had a near-death experience, I'd really love to hear about it, because it can be a really liberating thing, and I think that if more people had near-death experiences, they wouldn't feel so afraid of death, because you'd know, even if nothing's actually happening except for the chemical releases in your body and in your brain are taking you into a more comfortable place, even that, what an amazing thing that our bodies are created in order to help us get through anything. Our bodies are literally created to help us get through everything, even death. In the moment of death, these chemicals get released in us that help us cope with that moment and potentially takes us into other dimensions, into the multiplicity of reality, because this physical reality just isn't it. I know it in my bones that this isn't the only thing. And I've experienced it. And I'm curious if anybody else has any past life stories. And if you don't, highly recommend past life regression. That's something that maybe people haven't heard of before, and that's where somebody who is in trained in psychic realms can help you move through and understand maybe some of your past lives that have played a part in how you physically are manifesting some situation in this life. There's also the Akashic Records. If you have not heard of the Akashic Records, it's something very, very interesting. Essentially, an access to all information that ever was, ever is, ever could be, that's in the etheric realms, that anybody has the ability to tap into, but it takes practice and understanding of your own innate, intuitive, psychic gifts. Highly recommend, if that's something you're interested in understanding past lives, understanding how maybe they are affecting you in your current reality, because I know that I have definitely had some past life regressions and some Akashic records readings, and they have been extremely helpful for me, particularly like and just knowing and experiencing the fact that I truly believe that I have had alternate lives where I have either killed myself or died in one way or another, and I still remember them. Most of them were me killing myself, though, honestly. And I think that I have some semblance of memory of that because it was so important for me to not do that in this lifetime. And it may sound dark, but it doesn't feel dark to me. It feels like par for the course. It feels like the humanity and the suffering that we're constantly going through is the darker part. This is the harder part, like finding some way to have joy and have love and have comfort and stability in a constantly changing landscape is uncomfortable. But the more that I learn, the more that I realize I think that we are here to experience. Because in alternate realms, there may not be this varied level of experience, and all of the lows make way for the highs, and all of the highs make way for the lows. And we couldn't experience one without the other. And that's why the dark and the light have to work together. It can't just be focused on the positivity. This goes back to what I was talking to last week. We aren't out here just focusing on love and light and denying the shadow realms. Denying the shadow realms is what keeps white supremacists keeping all of these healing techniques and all of these things that are going to essentially make the whole world a better place, just so that certain people can have their power or their abundance or what have you. We have opportunities now to change those tides. And I think that a really important thing to note is that as long as we're afraid of death, it's going to be way harder to deal with these tides that are working against us right now. Because we have to be able to face death in this time and to understand that death is not the end. Death is not the end of anything. It could feel like the end. It could be painful. It could be some type of charged thing that not only affects you, it affects the people around you, the people who care about you, but it is not the end. And to be afraid of it does us a disservice, because then we are constantly making choices based on, how do I not die? How do I not die? And that's not the focus. That can't be the focus all the time. We need to be focusing on, how do I live in the best way possible for me, for my personal situation and my personal life story and my ecosystem that I am in and contributing to. And I think about this a lot because there's a lot of people who are dying. If they're not dying from this rampant disease or any other rampant disease that has happened or will happen, because we live in a country that, generally speaking, there's enough of a population that can't be bothered to care about the rest of the population, that it is extremely detrimental to all of us. It's not just, it's more Black and brown people who are losing people, but it is not just us. It's I know in my personal sphere, separated by only a couple degrees, at least 6 people that have died from COVID related things right now. And that's just in the past couple of months. And the numbers are incredibly high. Obviously, the whole world knows. The whole world's like, no, girls, stay in America, stay in the United States. We don't want any of you coming around here. And I can't blame them, because the biggest disease isn't just COVID. It's a lack of empathy and a lack of care for life. Not just dehumanizing, but like not caring about animals, not caring about plants, not caring about the land, all of this life. So, and I don't think that it's all of us that don't care, because obviously I care. Obviously, I think that you care if you're watching this. We care about life, but we're so entrenched in the psychological warfare of colonization and capitalism that we feel like we can't care. We feel like we can't even devote. We're constantly being pressured to look in any other direction but caring, but mutual aid, you know? And so I just really want us to think about how we are spending our time, our energy, because life is incredibly precious. Life is everything. We have so much power. We are individually so empowered. And I want to share, like, I had the blessing of talking to my friend Carla at Faith Fawcett on Instagram. If you want to check her out, she's doing amazing things, holding down a lot of frontline work in Portland. As you may or may not know, Portland has been going off and has had some fanfare in the news because federal officers showed up and just started clamoring in on the people, the protesters there, the Black Lives Matter protesters. And though there was this moment where it was all eyes on Portland, or at least a lot of eyes on Portland, because of what was happening and just random agents coming in and abducting people off of the street. But what doesn't get talked about, the beautiful things that I get to hear about, because I have a friend who's actually down there in the streets, a part of all of this organizing, is that the organizations have never stopped. Like, the protesting has never stopped. And because there's also this added pressure to not be inside with groups of people and everybody being outside trying to social distance, I hope, or whatever, there is this added beautiful thing where everybody is able to, particularly now because it's not the rainy season in Portland, which takes up a dramatic chunk of the year, but the people can really just organize together. The Black and brown communities in Portland have really been able to band together and utilize space in a way that wasn't always possible there. And having been a person who lived there for a little while in past lives, but past lives in this life, I remember the way that it was just not really accessible in so many ways to the people that people said that they wanted to uplift, that activists said that they wanted to uplift, because it was still so steeped in this like white supremacist capitalist culture where white people were gatekeeping all of the spaces and all of the organizing and the ways, because there's just a larger white population. And if you look at, actually, like, Portland's this little bubble where it's maybe more liberal if you're looking at it from a zoomed out point of view, and you see this quirky little place where there's just young people living their lives and cheap rent or whatever. Maybe it's not cheap rent anymore. It was like 10 years ago more when I was there. But it was a place where I think people had and continue to have good intentions, but also still very much steeped in a lot of white supremacy and capitalism that didn't really allow for the tight-knit community bonds to happen across socioeconomic and identity spectrums. And now, as this being Portland being a place where it is largely surrounded by what we may call Trump country, and it's this liberal hub surrounded by a lot of scary foot soldiers. That's what I think. Like, that's how I perceive a lot of these people who are just like, yeah, Trump, fuck brown people. Like, I don't know, I don't know why people have to be like that, but it very much was like that. If you went outside, if you went past like 60th in Portland, you would run into some scary situations if you weren't looking white. And so if I'm looking at it from what I perceive to be a strategic standpoint, Portland seems like a great place to start with this idea of sending in random federal officers, because I was asking Carla, like, who were these Homeland Security, who were these? And she just kept saying they're the feds. They didn't have badges, they didn't have any identification, they were just fatigued up and they were swooping people. And the reason why Portland works so well for that is because of that particular ecosystem and the way that they can kind of control the narrative by it just being the nature of the space and there being enough of a cushion around it, I think, to keep the narrative how they want it. Because if feds just showed up in the Bay Area and just started swooping people, and there are unmarked cars out here to this day. Like today I was walking my dog and there's an alleyway right by my place, and and one of the women in the alley was like, black truck, and then a black truck comes by and it's two cops in there, unmarked black truck Tahoe, and they just slowly skirt down this driveway, just looking for some reason to trap up the primarily black people who are staying on the streets right over here. And the beautiful thing about that was that moment when I could tell that all of the people who exist on the street were looking out for each other. And also, there's definitely this presence of unmarked police that are definitely swooping people, or at least attempting to swoop people when they feel like it, but not in the way that they're doing it in Portland. Here, they're still focusing on the people that they perceive to be invisible, in the way that there's a lot of wealthy people who walk by all of these people and act as if they are not there. I know these people. These are my neighbors. These are the people who look out for me. I look out for them. I stayed there and I watched that black car and I made sure that it didn't swoop anybody out of this damn alleyway. But there's not like, if they started taking protesters in the way that they're doing in Portland, it'd be a whole different scene here. There's so many people to mobilize here. And I see a critique happening, or I've heard a critique happening from multiple people about, well, how come the Bay Area isn't going up the way that other places are going up? And I think, I mean, there's many reasons. There's many reasons for this, and for the reasons why I think most of us have gone deeply, deeply underground. I think there's a lot of people, I know that there's a lot of people who are still constantly organizing, who are still trying to find ways to get resources from who has resources to the people who don't have resources here. But a lot of our people, the activists, the people who, even the people who are activists and who are here right now, myself included, we're strained and we're forced to go deeply underground because there's way more wealthy people here. There's way more wealthy people here than there are homeless people, people who are below the poverty line like myself. A lot of people who are below the poverty line here have just been pushed out completely. And so we're hanging on for dear life, and also have the collective awareness and remembrance of what happened to the activists who came to a head here. And people do know that it's not nothing for the government to come in and kill people. And I think that even the government knows that they have to be strategic with the places that they decide to send these whatever feds in. I know Trump's out there talking about, we're going to send them in to all of the cities. Really? Okay. Can we just bring it back to the fact that there are more of us than there are of wealthy elite, than there are of the dumb, poor, white supremacist henchmen that they send, that the wealthy elite utilize to send in to fight with us about whether we deserve the right to live or to have common human decency or all of these things, you know? There's a lot of factors at play, and we have to look at our ecosystem and see what is going on and what we are able to do, and to know that actually a lot is happening even if you don't see it. And I know this because I can talk about Portland and I can talk about all of the beautiful things that they're doing, how my friend, she's out there organizing drummers and doing front line for all of these protests and holding it down and witnessing all of this beauty that's coming from the people, because people who have resources are showing up and sharing it, and people are really willing to take steps back and allow Black women to move to the front and to decide how and when these different actions are going to happen, and stop allowing just white people to be the ones running all of the shows. And I'm seeing and hearing about these beautiful acts of mutual aid and beautiful acts of caring and believing in each other and shutting the feds down. And I mean, granted, the feds are still there and they still come out when they feel like it, but they're not out there every single day tear gassing people. And that's because of the light that got shined on them when they were doing that. And I think that we're in a specific kind of world at this point that can't just kill us all with impunity and expect the world to not rise up against that. And in so many places, people have been pushed to the point of absolutely no return. And some of us here are at that point. I think in places like Chicago right now, people are really at that point. And all over the place, the cops just keep on shooting people. Cops just keep killing people. People keep running into protests with their cars. Like, this is, I think, since the rebellion started, of this really anti-police, abolish the police rebellion started, I think that they've said that there's been about 66 cars plowing through people, and I think that maybe 7 have died. And I'm just like, what in the Grand Theft Auto is this shit? It's so cowardly, it's so destructive, it's so fucked up, the ways that any of us, we people are just not safe right now. But at the same time, we can't allow that fear to control us, because that is one way of many ways that we are consistently being disempowered. We're consistently just getting the life sucked out of us. And another thing that I want to talk about, I've been asking this to many people particularly over the past week. And I posed this question to any of you, and if anybody wants to get back to me on it, I would love to hear what you have to say. But the question is, what do we really get by engaging with whatever? What, like let's say recently there was, just a couple hours outside of here, Nevada City, there was a Black Lives Matter protest, and there was a counter protest of Blue Lives Matter, you know, the people with their black and white American flag and their blue line, like blue lives, cops, I don't know. So they show up, and you know, they've got their Trump shirts, they've got their flag poles with their Blue Lives Matter flags, and they're beating people up, they're slamming people on the ground. One guy just got arrested for slamming somebody on the ground and taking somebody's phone and throwing it in a sewer. And I just want to like come to like, I'm not trying to shade anybody. I'm just trying to really understand like what is the end game when we engage with these people who are adamantly, decidedly focused on protecting the rich people who don't give a single flying fuck about them. What do we get from trying to engage with them at all? Like, literally at all. And I know that these people are violent. We know that these people don't care. Like, this man will probably go to jail, and it will probably just make him more pissed, and he'll probably get out because he's a white man, and white men can do no wrong in terms of the court system. And he might come out and just want to jump back in and start killing anybody who thinks that they want to part their lips to say that Black Lives Matter. And I'm looking at life through an energetic push and pull. And I know that not everybody can like maybe see or feel energy in a very visceral way in their body. I think that actually we all can, but we have been dulling ourselves in so many ways that we push that away from us. But if you allow yourself to witness energy, witness how much energy you lose when trying to engage one of these people. One of these people who is just going to say every fucking thing that they can to hurt your feelings, they have absolutely no intention of changing to your side or even trying to see your side and empathize with your side, because they are focused on wishing you were dead, you know? And so, what do we get from interacting with these people? And what do we get? I was talking to her about this piece that I got from Emergent Strategy. I was blessed to read the book and also get to go to a workshop on with Adrienne Marie Brown here in Oakland. And we're talking about flocking and how, let me roll it back. So what I was talking to Carla about was this one particular situation where she and her fellow drummers, mostly POC and Black, were created a front line of drums, and they were standing in front of a police line and drumming and just like trying to get the energy up, and you know, as much as you can get the energy up in Portland, because people are not really dancing in Portland. If you know anything about Portland, it's not the most dancey of places, particularly for the white folks. Don't get mad at me. I'm just saying what it is. Anyways, so they're playing their drums, and these young white anarchists run up and throw eggs at the cops. So they're throwing eggs at the cops, but they're throwing eggs at the cops and they're running away. And so that leaves all of these POC who are doing this frontline drum situation in a very dangerous state where they actually all had to run with their drums. And when it was brought to their attention, like, hey, can we at least just talk about the strategy behind being a couple of white people throwing eggs at cops and then running away and leaving the brown folks to deal with it? then we get, oh, don't police our tactics, don't police our tactics. And even that right there, even just that situation of not being able to have a coherent conversation about how somebody's actions directly affect the physical well-being of other people, that is an energetic suck. That is a cord that is created between you, the situation, and the person that can take your energy straight out from under you. And in that situation, sometimes the best is to just remove yourself from the situation. But when I'm talking about flocking, what I'm talking about is, how do we, in whatever situation that we're in, because if you're looking at the world, you're looking at a place that is continuously getting more and more intense in the ways that we are going to be butting heads against a dying system that literally just wants a lot of us to die. And that system is built off of taking our energy, siphoning our energy off of us in a million little ways. One of which is by forcing or asking us to engage with something that does not see us as worthy of living, that doesn't see us as worthy of having anything to contribute, even though we have everything to contribute, and it is our energy that is getting siphoned that does create the wealth and the power that is being hoarded from us. And it's really important that we take an opportunity to realize how much it's just so incredibly important to really mitigate what we are contributing our energy to at any given time, and understanding how we feel when we are giving our energy to these situations, like butting up against the cops, people who in the 3D physical realm are stacked up so much more than we are. They've got all of the shields, they've got all of the weapons, they've got all of this like particular strategic training of how to really intimidate and hurt people. And we're just clashing up against them. And I understand why. I understand why we have this rage and this hopelessness. But where are we putting our energy? What does revolution actually look like in times like these? To me, in my perception, part of my perception, is revolution looks like a refusal to engage with all of this. And people are dying. And unfortunately, I think people are going to continue to die. And we're all going to die. We are all going to die. But to live a revolutionary life in this moment, if you're just looking at the one microcosm that you're in right now, or if you zoom out and you fucking spin the globe, put your finger down and see what atrocities are happening there, because I can pretty much guarantee you that it is completely global at this point that atrocities are happening. And how are we supposed to gather the strength and the energy to create a new reality while we are engaging with the old reality that has made it abundantly, magnificently clear that they just want us to die? The thing is, while we will all die at some point, there are more of us that believe in community, that believe in mutual aid, that have incentive to want to find a better way of living together. And what we need to do is really stop focusing on this small percentage. And I'm going to say that the small percentage is the wealthy, rich, elite people who make it clear that they don't care about the people and they don't care about life or humanity unless it directly affects them. So that's a small segment of people. And then there's another small segment of people that is the misinformed, ignorant sect of goons, essentially. People who have been trained to be the goons, who, for whatever reason, have this intense allegiance and fight for these rich, wealthy elite, as if maybe at some point they would get to be the rich, wealthy elite by being the people who basically fight for them, do the fight for them. I think if we're really looking at the like nationalist militias of the world and the wealthy elite, it is just really a small percentage of the entire global population. And so even if these goons and the wealthy elite wanted to kill everybody else, they couldn't. They've been trying. The genocide has been over and over and over again. And it's not possible to kill us all. It is completely impossible to kill us all unless species extinct, which is a very real possibility, to be honest. And if that is the case, that our species must go extinct because we can't get it together and work together, then that may just be what it is. But I really do believe that it can be different. I wholly in my heart believe that we can create a different reality for ourselves, and it requires a multitude of things. And I think that a few of these things will be to find some way to not fear death, because the fear of death is what keeps us imprisoned in this reality. To find a way to stop allowing our energy to be siphoned from people who want to take it from us. And to 3, to find a way to support each other and to do whatever little things that we can do to continually support each other. And so I really believe that a revolution is possible if we can try and focus on some of these things in whatever little ways that we can integrate those into our lives. And I really just pray constantly for our collective awareness, our collective ability to empathize with each other. And I honestly also believe that when we draw the boundaries very hard and strict, where we're like, we actually choose not to engage with this anymore, that is when people are much more incentivized to take a look at what our side is, to take a look at what our perspective is. These people, some of like the goon sect of nationalist militia type people, these are the people who want us to come out and fight with them. They want to yell at us. They want to tell us how amazing Trump is and whatever. Why? Why engage with them? Why fight them? We already know that they don't care about us. We already know that they'd kill us if they had the opportunity. So why expend our energy in that direction when we could be expending our energy in art and love and care for each other and feeding each other and sharing our resources, we have so much opportunity and ability to do this, to do what I call revolution. But we have to be able to focus on that, and we have to be able to stop focusing our energy on things that distract us from that. And there's a lot of things that are trying to distract us from that, whether it be the news stories or just whatever's going on in our city, in our town, in our community. There's so much distraction, but I really think if we just like continue to orient ourselves, we can really turn the tides, and we can really believe that a different world is possible, and we can really heal ourselves. And when we heal ourselves, we heal the world. So, prayers to that. Blessings to all of the land, the one consciousness, the black flame, our guides, our guardians, our divine forces, the original inhabitants of these places that we're on, the mothers, the moon, and the earth. Thank you all so much for coming and joining this situation of my little podcast. And may all who need to return their attention elsewhere, please do so and have blessings on your journey. May all who continue to walk with us, thank you so much for your continued guidance and support. Blessings, ashe, aho, farewell.